When you think about Web3, there's always a discussion about crypto, and there's not as much discussion about the other use cases, about digital property rights in the metaverse or in gaming. Do you think that that acts sort of as a wall to other populations that maybe are not as financially savvy or don't have as much access to the information?
100%. I think it's an education layer that's missing, even within crypto. So we spoke about tokenomics earlier, and I gave quite a long definition of what I felt tokenomics was, and there might be an underlying understanding of what it is, but we have different interpretations of what that looks like. We talk about digital property rights, and in gaming, you can argue gamers are the closest adopters to crypto because they understand this, but they don't. It's a fundamental shift in mentality. Like if you're buying a skin on Fortnite, for example, you do not own that skin. You are renting it from that platform.
Yeah.
There is no ownership there. And then we talk about data, and I gave the example of WhatsApp earlier. These are people who understand the value of their data, and they're still using WhatsApp. So I still think we have a way to go. But then we talk about, let's say, Axie Infinity, for example. In the rise of the previous bull run, Axie was one of the prominent players within that. But fundamentally, it wasn't necessarily for the gameplay. It was more for the case of people in Southeast Asia during COVID, that we might add as well, bearing in mind that they're quite a labor-intensive workforce.
Right.
It's not a welfare state, so there were no handouts. So it's all, how can I make money to survive? Well, I'm able to play this game, generate a few dollars in a week, at least at the beginning, and that's more than what I was earning as a laborer. And all of a sudden, this narrative of play to earn kicked off. Now, for me, that was a big moment in crypto. And people can argue that it wasn't sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. It was a hypothesis. It was an idea that went out, and we saw what worked, and we also learned what didn't work. So it was a great experiment or example from that perspective. But what we saw was that if people are pushed into a difficult situation, they will play games to work.
Yeah.
And that becomes a means of income. And then we talk about hyperinflation in many different countries, and some countries have been forced to take on Bitcoin as a means of protecting their savings or being able to transact in a currency that preserves some form of value, even given its volatile nature. But versus some fiat currencies are a lot more volatile than Bitcoin. So we are seeing a shift in narrative, but there is that education layer that's missing.
It's so funny you mentioned the example of the skins in Fortnite. I was just speaking to Liam before you came in, and he was asking, what are digital property rights? I said, what were you playing before we came here? Fortnite. Okay. Did you have a skin? Yes. Do you own it? No, you don't own it, right? And so it is sort of a channel, sort of a pathway to teach people about what digital property rights are. I was on LinkedIn last week, and I posted that I remember very early on, one of my favorite games growing up was River City Ransom. Now, I don't know if you ever played this game.
I haven't.
Okay, so this game is like, it's a street fighting game. Think of Street Fighter, but in story mode as you go through. And it's you and another player, and basically you have things like chains and nunchucks, and you can, beat money out of people, right?
I like this game.
It was great, right? It was a great, it was like before.
Pre-GTA by the sound
Exactly,
of it, yeah.
Exactly. So you're going through different streets, beating up people for their money, and then you use the money to buy what you like. You buy skins. They weren't called skins then. They were just called like outfits or whatever. And, you were able to buy food. You're able to buy skills. But that created sort of like, it was always like you want to come back to the game to level up. You want to come back. I mean, not just to beat people, but you want to come back to see what else you can do. What else can you get from the game? And I sense that, this sort of engagement in the game creates community, and it also pulls people in different ways. I mean, there is that monetization piece, but there's also other driving factors in that.
100%. I think when we think of games, we think of the game as the be-all and end-all, but it's a start point. And we've seen communities or meta games built around the game. You might have the core gamers, but like Twitch streamers, for example, and the audience, there were people who would just watch Twitch streams for hours and maybe spend a fraction of that actually playing the game. Well, are they adding value to that ecosystem? Of course they're adding value to that ecosystem, because they're spending their time, and fundamentally what everyone is after is time. How can we have people's eyes on our product versus another product, and then how are we able to monetize that? And that's really where Web3 and digital assets come in. Because if I have a fungible token, for example, it gives me a form of social equity within that ecosystem. So if I'm someone watching, I don't know, a Twitch stream for Fortnite, maybe with my tokens, I can vote on what the next skin is, or I can have a say in something, or at least I have that feeling that I have a voice and I'm part of an ecosystem, versus just being someone at the end of the supply chain where it's just extract. Web2 is very extractive. Web3 really tried to look at virtuous cycles or cyclical effects and positive network effects. And that's what the technology really allows us to do. We just haven't sold it in the right way as of yet.
Yeah. It's funny when I hear you talk about this. I mean, I relate to it very much because I have teenage sons, and I also, was into gaming and stuff. And I'm wondering, those people who are in corporate and who are like, well, it's just gaming, and maybe they've seen their kids on iPads play, but they don't really see the full potential of gaming. They don't really understand where gaming is taking us as a society. What would you say to kind of enlighten them on that?
They're missing the bigger picture. There's more than just what's in the spreadsheets. And obviously from a corporate perspective, it's always about the bottom line, which is understandable for a business. But then sometimes you do have to take a step back and understand that we live in a very complex society today versus maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the rise in technology. And just the things that, the aspects that we spend our time on, there are so many more distractions from that. So there's so many more games, there are so many more things where I don't know, maybe I'm pro-green, maybe I want fossil fuels, maybe I support this team. There are so many things that we can be vocal about. But games is something that actually unites a lot of people together. And then as the reference I was giving earlier, like people who watch the streams, maybe people who create the fan-generated art and user-generated content around that, there are then these ecosystems that are there. And it's time really the corporates stop thinking about how can we just extract value, but more so how can we provide value so that value can grow. So then the underlying asset has a lot more value and everyone wins. And I think really what crypto allows is for win-win situations. And that's this virtuous cycle that we're referring to, or the blue ocean mindset, versus moats, silos, red ocean, where it's me against you versus it's all of us against the world. Or why even against the world, it's just all of us to make this a better place where we value each other's contributions.
Yeah, that's so true. And